Thank you to everyone who's watching this session of Angel NV Entrepreneur Bootcamp. Today we're going to be hearing from Nick Jones about storytelling for entrepreneurs. About Nick. Nick has nearly 25 years of experience as a principal and manager of various internet ventures and has co-founded Varcane, a venture firm in Las Vegas. Prior to Varcane, Nick first established and managed Load.com as a premier provider of outsourced web applications for web-based messaging, content management systems, hosted DNS, and large file delivery. At Load.com, raising capital and developing strategic partnerships with companies like the NFL, Universal Music Group, and Mandalay Resort Group. More recently, Nick spearheaded the successful creation and launch of JRNL.com, a personalized online journaling service amassing more than 100,000 members and growing. Nick currently serves as the Chief Development Officer at Databooey Corporation and sits on the board of various Varcane portfolio companies. Nick attended the United States Air Force Academy and received a bachelor's degree in economics and management from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas. With that out of the way, we're going to get right into it.
And thanks everyone for showing up. It seems to be getting really dark now that the time has changed, so it feels a lot later than it really is. We're going to talk about storytelling for entrepreneurs, and my slide says 2.0, and that's because last year, I think around this time, I gave the first talk about this, and over the past year, it never fails. After I give a talk, I think, oh, I should have mentioned this, or this is really relevant. And what ended up happening is I went back through the presentation, and I'm raising a lot of money right now, and I'm telling a lot of stories, and stories have evolved. So I wanted to talk about this. Now, normally, storytelling for a business should be the very first presentation that you guys get when you're talking about starting a company. I believe it is the most important aspect of any startup company. I believe it is the lifeblood of how you build culture. I think it's also how you get other people to repeat your story. And believe it or not, I see so many companies that fail at telling their story. And it's because telling your story is actually hard if you're not spending time. Making your story really easy is actually very hard. You need to think about who your audience is. You need to think about what that storytelling framework is going to be, and we'll go through that a little bit. But I can tell you personally, I've seen brilliant founders, engineers who are geniuses, who cannot tell their story, and their company gets passed over all the time. I see it all the time. I've also seen really slick speaking founders with terrible ideas and terrible business plans get funded. It happens all the time. And so one of the challenges is which one are you, right? What company are you trying to build? Are you able to articulate your story? And the story is really important because you need to tell it in such a way that someone can repeat it. They need to be able to go out and spread the gospel of your business and repeat. I call it feed it to repeat it. You need to be able to put it out there and get people to say, okay, I understand your story so well that I can sell it to other people. And believe it or not, so many times you will tell someone else a story and they will know someone who has money that you would have never met. And if they're able to tell your story correctly, that's where the network effect of raising money really comes into play. So we're going to talk about that. So let's get in. I'll go through this really quick. The things I'm going to show you really just tell you that I'm old. Basically, I've been managing partner since 2013, a serial entrepreneur since back in the 1900s, raised more than 30 million in seed stage and Series A investing rounds. So last year was about 25. I've done about 5 million raised in the past year. I'm a pitch coach for multiple tech incubators. I've done that for a long time. I am usually selected to present for companies that have a technical founder who can't tell their story. And usually it's because I've either invested in their business, I see and understand their business maybe better than the founder, so I'll step in and help them out. And I currently serve as the Chief Development Officer at Databooey Corporation. The quick sales pitches, we make acoustic sensors that can identify and detect active shooters, indoor, outdoor, and vertical. And this hasn't been announced, but I'm going to say it. We landed Caesars Entertainment. We're actually going to be deploying, we'll be the first company that's actually deploying sensors on the strip around a casino property. And for us, it's a massive deal. And we have a big install going on next week. And I mentor and advise to a lot of CEOs. So that's what gives me a little bit of street cred. But let's talk about why storytelling matters. First, in a startup, your story is your brand. Now, what do I mean by that? When you have your first company or your first idea, usually you know nothing about branding, you know nothing about marketing, you haven't acquired your social handles, you don't know your domain name yet, you have an idea. And how you articulate that idea is what everyone remembers. When someone looks at you, they're going to remember the story you told about your business, or they're going to completely forget you. They're going to go, oh yeah, that's the company that does X. And that's how they're going to describe you. So you need to think about what that story is that you share with people. Stories, as usual, are more memorable. People do not remember charts and numbers. They remember the stories. They remember how that story made you feel. Are you passionate about your idea? Stories connect us emotionally. I have an example, and we may not be able to see it tonight, but I've created a list of resources that you can access after the point, where I show you an example of a story that I crafted for a business that I launched back in 2016. And you'll see that story arc as we get into the storytelling architecture. And then stories get shared. And so, as I said, when you're going to be talking about your business, let me give an example. How many of you have ever pitched at like a demo day where you have to stand in front of a room with about 10 other businesses? Okay. If I'm going to go out on a limb and say, in that environment, it's really challenging to make sure that your business stands out amongst the room of other businesses. And you can tell which entrepreneurs really thought through their story, really created this image and vision of what they're going to be selling, and that will set you apart. So some of the things we're going to talk about today are a little bit about your elevator pitch. We're going to talk about these different types of stories, but we're also going to focus more on what I call your pitch deck, your demo day pitch. So your storytelling framework, and last year I had this all animated. I think it's easier for you to see this. Every good story has a setup. There's an event that takes place. There's a problem in the market or a problem that the founder experienced. And then there was some sort of change that they created in order to make it unique. And then there's a victorious outcome. I invested in a company called Upcart, and they were this really cool 6-wheeled folding cart that you could pull up and down the stairs. They were a failed Kickstarter campaign. I reached out to the founder, backed them. They ended up becoming the fastest selling product ever on QVC. And they had a really easy story. Most of the best products that I see, at least from a small standpoint, there are people who make modifications to something that exists and made it better. So I have an example of a company that I'm pretty certain the ladies listening and also here in the room will remember. Let's talk about the Spanx story, if you're familiar with it. So let's talk about this framework. The setup was Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, or the former CEO of Spanx. She was getting ready for a party when she realized that the problem was that she didn't have the right undergarment to provide a smooth look under white pants. The change was that, armed with scissors and sheer genius, she cut the feet off her control top pantyhose, and the victorious outcome was the Spanx revolution began. Now, from a large story perspective, you can tell an entire pitch story. You can tell people how you found this. But this story that I just shared is front and center about the company. This is a story that I guarantee you she crafted when she was selling the original investors, but it is the story that lives today on the about page for a billion-dollar brand. Stories matter. They live with your company. You have to really think about that and look at the setup. All of these things matter. So I want to get into my core storytelling beliefs. You must know your audience. My stories that I share with companies really depend on who the audience is. If I'm selling to a salesperson or a director of operations, the way I speak to them, the language that I use is different than if I'm speaking to someone technical. You have to know who you're presenting to. If you're presenting to an investor, you better really understand what other deals they've invested in. If you don't know that, you better be really good at reading body language. I can tell you, I've been in meetings with a founder, and as they're presenting to someone, I've watched the investor look down at their phone. If you don't understand that that's a sign, I mean, we've all gone on dates, right? Like that's usually not a good sign. So from an investing perspective, if they start to lose interest or they're not engaged, you have to know who you're presenting to, and you better craft your story for that person. I have a very core belief, and I don't know that many people agree with this, so I feel like this is kind of mine. I feel like you have a maximum 3 minutes to believability. What does that mean? I believe in any conversation, when someone is going to be listening to your business story, you have 3 minutes to convince them by simple body language. They start nodding yes with the things you say. They don't even realize they do it. They just naturally start nodding yes, like I agree with what you're saying. Oh, I see it. You have 3 minutes. And I want to share something really quick. I don't want to go off track too much. Last year, I talked about storytelling. And I talked about the importance of creating this storytelling arc. And someone went out and crafted a story, but their story was 15 minutes long. I was appalled because I thought, did I not focus enough on 3 minutes? You have to get to the point. And believe it or not, I have sat in meetings where someone wants to invest $10, $15 million. The investor asks a question, the founder or the CEO or the startup creator or inventor answers the wrong question, and they cannot succinctly share their story, why it matters. It kills every deal. I've seen investors come in mentally prepared to cut a check and talk themselves out of it. Your story does matter. Make your idea theirs. I believe that the idea of inception does work. If any of you have seen that movie where the idea is to plant a seed in someone else's head and make the idea theirs, you win. If you can get someone listening to your story and they're logically coming to the conclusion that you created, they already sell themselves. So you have to really think about that. Whenever I'm pitching, I think about what is the natural course of thought or idea that comes to mind. If I tell you this, what are the vectors that I might go off? What would be the question or thought I might have? You need to really think through that, because when the person is in line with your idea and they start finishing their sentences in their mind, they know they do it, and you can see them do it because they're nodding yes with you. You have to make your idea theirs. And I didn't have this last year, so I have your story must evolve. Let me give you an example. Last year in my presentation, I gave an example of one of my favorite portfolio companies called PowerIt. They're this really awesome battery manufacturer out of Seattle. They made a instant power zinc air chemistry battery. And I told a story about how that founder came to this conclusion. And then I asked at the end, now let me ask you, how many of you believe that story is true? And then I said, does it matter? Right? I was like telling you about the story and getting people to believe and buy into your idea. Well, what has happened, and this happens to almost every company I've ever seen, and I've had really smart investors advise me that the company they invest in at the beginning is usually not the company that they are invested in when they start learning how to make money. That's because smart companies pivot quickly. Usually you have your hypothesis, this is what my business is, but then along the way you start to realize, well, that really doesn't make money, or it's not that good, or maybe there was a competitor I didn't know about that does it better than me. I need to shift and pivot. Ideas evolve. If you cannot shift your story, that means your business is not changing. That means 2 years from now, even if you have an exciting business, but your story hasn't changed, everyone will say to you, oh, that's that company that was doing that thing. That's old news. So today, PowerIt has built a software that allows them to almost track the life of a battery, a secondary battery, by checking out the chemistry of lithium-ion batteries, this idea of a second life market. The better way to say it, like an elevator pitch, is they're creating FICO scores for batteries. They've built a Fitbit for batteries. When you think about how you explain your business, try to take something that people are familiar with and then say, we're like the Stitch Fix for pets, right? If you can really relate that, it makes it easier for people to kind of understand what you do. Your story must evolve. Types of storytelling, the elevator pitch, which is what I just told you, right? We build FICO scores for batteries. Someone says, well, what is your business? You have to explain it compelling very quickly. Your origin story. This is when you're getting to sit down with someone one-on-one and they're actually interested in your business. How'd you come up with this idea? That's the Spanx story. Your pitch deck story, which I'll focus on more today. That is a very involved type of presentation. You have an opportunity to walk people down a path of your business and connect all the dots. And then you have your internal story, the why. The internal story is critical for your culture. If you don't have an internal story that all of your employees or all of your consultants can get behind, they don't understand and they cannot believe in what your business is about. At DataBuoy, we believe we're saving lives. We believe we're giving first responders the information they need to react faster, have situational awareness, and save lives. In that company, we all believe we're saving lives. But the core business might be, we're a data company. We're a sensor-based technology. We're going to plug into streetlights. We're going to make smart cities capable. From an investor perspective versus your employee perspective, you need to have the why your business exists to keep people invested. That is also part of the what I referred to earlier. It's the selling of the gospel of your business. You want people to go out and spread the reason they believe in your business. So let's talk about that pitch deck story, crafting your origin story. You got to make it personal. That makes it more believable. You have to use real experiences. It doesn't have to be real. It has to feel real. If you've ever listened to someone, especially your kids, you know when they're making up stuff, right? You're like, oh, that story sounds contrived. That would never really happen that way. So you got to be careful about the stories you tell. When you talk about this story crafting, you need people to, one of the biggest mistakes that founders make is they think they're the user. I had this problem. Everybody must have this problem. Clearly, everyone's going to use this because I need it. You have to really think about, do people understand the pain that you're solving in your business? And if you don't think, like, one of the worst answers you can give to an investor, especially me, is who's your target market? Everybody. Everybody would literally use this. It's an iPhone. Everybody would use an iPhone. Okay, well, no, that's not your market. You have to really think about what it is you're selling and who you're targeting to. And you have to be authentic. Everyone can read through it. Everyone can see it. Pitch it to people in your family, not your mom, because they usually think you're good at everything. But pitch it to someone who will call you out that you can trust, that knows you. Do they believe you when you tell that story? Identify the opportunity. Explain the hole in the market. Now, I know, and I'm one of those people, that if the hole in the market isn't big enough and I don't think there's enough money, I will immediately think, not for me, who do I know that this is good for? That's an issue. So you need to understand, are you pitching to a startup investor, like an angel investor, someone who's looking at putting in 50 grand, hoping they're going to make a 5 or 10x return as they get bought out during Series A or Series B? There's a big difference between that investor and the person who's looking to deploy $15 million. I'll give you an example. I think I said this last year. When I was 23, I thought $100 million was a lot of money. I was like, whoa, this business can make $100 million. And I really thought, man, we're going to be killing it. Now, don't get me wrong, $100 million is a lot of money. But when you're talking about businesses that are redefining an industry, they're talking multi-billions and trillions of dollars. The reason I got excited about DataBuoy is I believe the future of smart tech is sensors, smart sensors everywhere. I do not believe the future is less sensors and less intelligence. I believe smart cities are going to happen. I believe it's going to be almost impossible to get away with crime. Now, we can all debate if they'll prosecute, but it'll be hard to get away with it, right? But I look at that market and the transition of that, someone's going to win that market and become a standard. That's going to be a $100 billion opportunity. When I started load.com, we were basically Google Apps before Google Apps existed. That thing could have been huge, but we were thinking really small. So how we raised money affected how we talked about the hole in the opportunity in the market. Do your research. Inserting your product or service. Your product or service better actually solve that problem. Not kinda, better really solve it if you're going to tell that story. Be realistic about your customer. If you don't know what someone's going to spend to buy your product, you don't know your customer. If you say things like, I asked my family and they said they'd buy it for $30 a month, no bueno. That's not a good target market. And here's an interesting thing that you may not realize. You can actually get data from about 100 correspondents, and that will actually tell you what the mass population will actually do. If you're doing an honest survey, only 100 people, okay? It's not 10,000, it's 100. And all of the top marketing experts and branding experts are going to tell you that gives you that snapshot that you're looking for to validate your idea. Be vulnerable, be victorious. So the video of me, you'll see it later. I didn't realize I was doing this when I did it. So I would spend weeks telling a story and crafting the pitch and figuring out how I was going to relay that message to a person. But the key is, and I believe this is probably mine, I think self-deprecation works really well. I think you need to be able to laugh at yourself, poke fun at the mistakes you made, the things you learned. I think that helps you connect with your audience. People can relate. Nobody's perfect. Definitely don't come across as that. You don't want to feel like your presentation pulls you in a direction where people think that you're too good. When I made my journal presentation in 2016, I had a major investor out of New York tell me, your pitch was too good, too slick. It was too perfect. You need to mess up. You need to kind of really stumble over your words somewhere because it sounds too good, almost rehearsed, right? Those pauses, those things matter. Believe it or not, you're acting. And sales really matter. If you don't think you're doing sales as a startup founder, you're dead. Yeah. Am I running out of time? Sorry, I'm talking too much.
No, I don't.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And the question is, as you were introducing this topic, you said that you crafted your story and you practiced it. How many hours would you say that you practiced it before going into the journal presentation?
I mean, no exaggeration. I put aside 3 weeks to craft the story. And during that time, I was probably practicing my pitch, standing in a room, and while I'm driving around, maybe 6 hours a day.
6 hours a day.
Yeah, because I know I'm going to ask people for money. Like getting someone to part with their money is really hard. I mean, outside of marriage, getting people to part with their money is really hard, right? I mean, it's tough. And you have to get them to believe in it. And so as I'm telling my story, I would actually ask myself, do I believe my own story? Would I buy what I'm selling, honestly? And the other thing is you have to record yourself, look at yourself in the mirror. You may think you make like great facial gestures or you do something with your hands while you're talking, and that might turn someone off. Like really record yourself and look at it. And no one's going to be more critical about you than you. So really go through it and put the time into it.
And that was for just one presentation.
Yeah, yeah.
So you prepare the same way for every presentation?
I do. Yeah, Maggie asked, she said, well, that preparation you did for one presentation, do you do that for every presentation? And the answer is yes. Obviously, given my work schedule, I don't always have the time to put into it. Like, I'll give you an example. I've been selling Data Buoy for 7 years. So I know the story really well. And depending on who I'm talking to, I know exactly what buttons to push. So when you understand your business, and this will always happen. You need to pitch your business so you get feedback from people. You can tell what people gravitate towards. You can tell what they reject. Listen to the questions they ask. If you didn't explain your business well enough that they're asking questions that are core to your business, your pitch is not good. It's not. If they can't understand, oh, this is your core business and this is what you do. And let me tell you, you better be able to get it out in one sentence. Someone has to be able to say, like, ask them after you do your pitch, so what is it you think I do? Hopefully that person can tell you. If they can't, you better keep working on it. The victorious outcome we talked about. What is the payoff at the end that makes people love your business, makes people want to pay for it? So I'm going to talk about the journal story, and I don't think we're going to be able to watch the video, but I put it online at nickjones.net. And also, I believe Logan's going to share it in the chat. But the core things you're going to look at is I added a personal origin story. I shared my fear and my challenge and the problem I was trying to solve. I identified the opportunity that other people might be having, and I had a victorious outcome. And you'll see it. The payoff was this beautiful, full color, hardbound book, is what I say in the presentation. If you get a chance to watch it, you'll notice that it's exactly 2 minutes and 45 seconds. In fact, it's probably less than that, because at the beginning, I try to crack a joke to the room full of people that I'm presenting to in New York to try to take their walls down. So it's about 2:30, really. And probably I'll skip past that. Yeah.
You recommend telling jokes in the beginning of the presentation?
I think it depends, right? I think I recommend telling self-deprecating jokes, right? Or something that's relatable. You know, I think it helps people believe who you are. And a lot of times people are looking to connect to a founder. I know you have to understand as an investor. So I'm going to talk to you as an investor. If I'm listening to your idea, I'm not just assessing if I think your business is worth a darn. I'm actually trying to look at you and say, do I think you're coachable? Do I think I could work with you? Do I think you're an egomaniac and you'll never listen to what I say because you're the founder and inventor and you're right? And believe it or not, there are investors who have told me numerous times, if the founder of the business is also the inventor of the idea, I run. And you go, wow, what if the idea is really good? And they go, because they never take advice. They're like, I'm the genius who came up with this idea. Nobody else thought of it. How could you possibly know what I know? And almost every investor runs from those types of opportunities. Upcart, and I hope I don't get sued for saying it, they're one of my favorite failures. This is a company that went from $0, a failed Kickstarter campaign, to almost 10 million in gross sales in 2.5 years. And by year 3.5 to 4, they were bankrupt. And it's because the founder and the CEO started butting heads, and the founder was never wrong. Dead business. So they're like my favorite mistake, right? That's a painful one. Storytelling tricks. Let's see here. Pause to remove your ums. So crutch words in your presentation make you sound stupid. There's no other way to say it. You could be brilliant, and if you say while you're explaining things to people, they will immediately check you down. They'll knock you down a rung, and you're not as smart. Now, that's really painful to hear, but it's the truth. I sat through a presentation where the presenter used so many times that when the presentation was done, one of the investors who connected that person to the family office swore at them. They said, I'm going to rip the out of your effing mouth. And you go, whoa, that's pretty serious. But they said so many times that even when we presented to a company, this person might have been, probably was the smartest person on the phone, but the client didn't understand who they were. And so they assumed they were our unintelligent tech person because they used the word How do you stop saying ums? You pause, take a breath, you rehearse not saying Really work on that. This is a little bit like an acting technique, right? You talk really big and then you Go really slow and quiet because it's a key point you want to make. There's on nickjones.net, I linked to a few people that give you examples of how your voice and intonation matter in your storytelling. You have to practice it. You have to record yourself and listen to it. You can end if you don't remember anything else. That's a great way to round out your story. And also, hey, tell me about your business. Well, let me tell you a story. That's a great way to dive into it, right? It's your story. Is it believable? And let's talk about putting it all together, putting into action. The way I do all of my presentations, I create a storyboard. Now, I don't do it like a normal comic book or a movie trailer. I line out my slides, and the way I do it is I start out with what my story is at the beginning, and then I list on the page what is the point or the argument I'm trying to make. I'm not putting anything on the slide of information. I'm not putting charts. I'm not putting market size, TAM, SAM, SOM stuff. I'm not doing any of that. I'm thinking, after I tell you the story, what is the argument and what are the segues between slides that walk you down this path? You have to storyboard it out. The create natural transitions are those segues between slides. You have to think about how you transition. If I'm going to talk to you about our business and how we're not trying to boil the ocean and do everything for everyone because we've got all of these great ideas in our completely holistic business, then I need to transition to the team that's actually going to pull it off. So I might say something like, look, and I realize what I'm saying is so big, but we have more than 100 years experience in enterprise SaaS-based systems and hardware development. And we have the core team to pull it off, right? How you do those transitions make people buy into it. Use your natural language, avoid slang. If you're going to start a hip hop business, then slang's fine, okay? If you're going to start one of my old, I'd say more of an acquaintance, but he had started a site called Hip Hop Site back in the late 90s, and he was selling hundreds of thousands of dollars in vinyl records to DJs. Okay, you can use slang all over that. But try to avoid using slang when you're presenting your business. One, you don't know what that slang means to a different generation. You also don't realize that if you say, where's the water fountain on the East Coast, they think of a park with a water fountain, and they actually call the water drinking fountain a bubbler. You got to be careful with how you refer to things. That matters. And this is the other thing. So I have a guy named Steve Reed. You should check him out. His site is Vector, VECTYR.com. And he has a YouTube channel called Brand or Die. Steve and I have been working together for over 15 years, almost 20 years now. And he makes all the difference in the world to the startups that I invest in. Fake it till you make it. If you have a small business, but it looks legitimate because you took a little time to care about your design and your marketing, it makes people think that's an investable business. And it's easier to build a site now more than ever. I mean, there are like drag and drop website builders and templates you can use. If you don't have a decent site that can tell your story and sell your value proposition, you're lazy, period. Oh, and we can get into domain names. I do that a lot, but pick the right domain name. Like, if you want to see the worst branding ever for products, go to appsumo.com. Brilliant products, horrible names of products. I laugh at it all the time. Go check it out for yourself. And as Maggie was pointing out, rehearse, rehearse, rehearse. If you don't put in time to your pitch and you wing it, and I've met many founders where I'll give you an example. This is real world. I spent 6 months getting a time where the major general partner of a real fund was going to give this founder 30 minutes. So 6 months of my life, building a relationship, convincing them that this idea is worth listening to. And I'm telling the founder, get ready, get ready, get ready. And as we're driving on a 6-hour drive to Salt Lake City, I look at the founder and I say, so give me your pitch. I want to hear it. He goes, I didn't really have time, man. I'm just going to wing it. The number one mistake I made then is not pulling over and canceling the meeting. That was a huge mistake on my part. That founder burned that bridge. And the thing you need to understand is I've had more investors call me, and I know other funds that have said the same thing. It is very difficult for someone like me to recommend a founder to an investor because it's my reputation. If I bring a horrible company to an investor and they think you're a clown, literally, they'll never listen to me again. So my reputation is on the line when I pitch you. So you need to understand, it's not that I don't like your idea. I think you're not ready. I've had investors say to me, if you ever bring me a company like that again, I'll never take your call. And these are people that I'm friendly with. And you go, whoa, what could that founder have possibly said that created that reaction? So you got to be careful. Most people will not open up their network if they don't believe in your ability to sell your own business. Ruins their reputation. And that's it. I'd like to actually jump into Q&A. Just so you know, like I said, the resources on nickjones.net. I'm actually going to be launching a podcast called Twisted Venture. I put up a episode just last night, more to kind of hold the place and really get into it. But the idea behind it is I want to bring on founders to have an opportunity to tell their business so I can pepper questions to them to help them do a better job. I also want to bring on investors that can tell the horror stories of bad businesses they've invested in and what they would have done differently. So my goal is really to support the entrepreneurial community and create a resource where you can learn and get some value out of it.
Awesome. Thank you, Nick. All right, well, we will field a number of questions from in person. Those that are online, please put your questions in the chat. I will fill them to Nick so we can get these answered. We'll kick it off with any questions in the room. And then, of course, Nick, if you would just repeat that back for the online attendance.
I will do my best. Yes. Yeah. So the question was, how do you connect? I'll try to parrot it back. How do you connect a founder inventor to this idea of the IP that was created without it kind of ruining? Because I said in my presentation, people do not invest in founder inventors. It's not always the case, but you'd be shocked at how often I hear people run from companies when they do that. So think of it more like this. It's very rare that a founder inventor has a high EQ, meaning that they understand their audience, they can relate to people. And in that challenge, usually if that person is smart enough to realize they can't wear every hat in the business, they usually have people around them that are really good. People want to know. So if I'm investing in a company, I want to know that the IP is there. I want to know that it's been locked up if you have patents. That's hugely valuable. But if that founder inventor is also the CFO and also the head of marketing, no way. I don't care how good the idea is. That person is not a good enough CEO to take that to market. But absolutely, if you have the bona fides as a founder inventor that talks about the things you've built in the past, and by the way, this is the IP you've created now, that's hugely valuable. It really is. And because people want to know, ideally, you try to invest in monopolies, right? And that's what patents and licensing does. And so you really need to think about it. So I would craft a story of a co-founder or a co-CEO or a co-COO who is helping you run the business, because most of the founder inventors that I've invested in, they've gotten money because they go, oh, thank God Nick's involved. Okay. Well, Nick will make sure that the ship is going straight. I mean, I have one company that they got $250,000 to $500,000, and it's 100% because I'm involved. And I'm not trying to be an egomaniac there. They told me that after rejecting the company, I had to talk them into investing. And they said, well, you're going to be there. So, okay. They're looking for someone that they can talk to that will listen to advice, that sees the world the same as them. And there are founder inventors who are unicorns that are phenomenal, and you can talk to them. They're just rare, and that's why most investors run from them.
Yeah, excellent.
I was going to say, do you feel like there's a big difference in the mindset of an engineer versus a comedian?
Oh, yeah. Do I think there's a difference in the mindset of an engineer and a comedian? I do, although one of my favorite comedians is the late Mark Norman, who was an MIT grad, right? That guy is a genius and has like such a funny take on things. Most comedians are really smart, right? And some of them are, some of them are engineers, but it's very rare. Like most of the really good engineers I know, they're on the spectrum, right? And that's okay. We got to have those people because they're usually the ones solving the stuff that I can't figure out, right? But they're not the people that you're going to use as your sales engineer, right? The sales engineer needs to be able to talk the tech, but they got to be relatable because vendors even are trying to figure out if they even want to work with you. If I have a problem and I got to call you, do I like working with you? Do I think you even understand what I'm saying? That like people that say they want to start a company and they don't believe in sales, you're selling all the time. All the time. I mean, it's the case, yes.
That's a great segment. So I was going to ask, would you recommend this storytelling approach within the sales process?
For sure, yeah, I would. Whenever we're crafting a value proposition, so this is where my buddy Steve Reed and his brand or die stuff really comes into play. When you're trying to create the value proposition for your business, and I'm sure you've all looked at many websites, right? The really good websites explain what it is our business does for you. So the mistake most engineers make is they want to talk about all the features of their technology front and center on the site. Our tech can do this and it does this, and look how cool our widget is, right? But the buyer wants to know what your technology is going to do for me. Right? If I'm the head of security in the case of Data Buoy, I want to know that you're going to make my property safer. I want to know that you're going to make me smarter. I want to know that you're going to make me look really good for choosing you. I don't really care about all your features. I mean, I do, but they're really trying to figure out, oh, this one's the one. This is the problem they're going to solve for me. If you're selling their website, same thing in your pitch deck. You have to sell what it is you do for someone else if they're going to buy it. That's usually where everybody fails. They usually go on, if they have a cool technology or a cool piece of software, they talk about all the features. And then they'll go, man, why is that company that doesn't have tech as good as me outselling me? Well, it's because they understand their story better. They understand the problem they're solving for the customer better. And almost invariably, they sell it better.
That's a really good point, because we see that all the time with very feature forward decks. But we're trying to figure out, okay, well, what's the problem that you're solving?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
the problem's a big one, right?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing from online is things that I've seen you speak a couple of times, and every time I learn something new. So thank you so much. But also a question from Mike, who also has a comment. Tell me as a subscriber. My question is, how many versions of a pitch, a long form, short form, would you recommend? And maybe I'll add an extension to this. What do you think of like the top kinds of pitches, whether it's an elevator, 5 minute, 10, whatever it might be?
Whenever I'm doing a pitch, so if I'm raising money, I have a shareable pitch, and I'm sorry I didn't cover this. I kind of glossed over it. You need to have a pitch deck that can live on its own, and it better be a PDF, and it has to be shared. Ideally, you use a service like ShareDoc or something so you can tell who's looking at it, but it needs to be able to live on its own, right? You can't be there all the time to sell it. So you better really tell a story, and it has to be short and sweet. Most people like me don't ever get through a full deck. By like the 5th or 6th slide, I'm like, I don't believe it. Yeah, I'm out. Right? I mean, it's sad to say, I hate to admit that I do that, but so you have your shareable deck, you have your stand in front of a room and sell you deck, which is more like your demo day pitch story. You have to have your elevator pitch, your short go-to phrase that everyone remembers what you do. You have to have that. You probably need about 4 or 5, to be honest. And then a sales deck, right? It's the melding of your story crafting of why your business exists, but also into the problem you solve. And the sales deck is usually what you're going to spend most of your time doing as a founder. You got to get people to buy your stuff.
And I think I'll add an addendum to this is a lot of times we see we've seen hundreds and we see dozens every year. One thing that we've seen, and this might be what Mike is referring to, is they talk about their core market, their go-to-market, their niche, what they're doing, their monopoly in a niche market, if you will, and then they expand from that. A lot of times their ultimate vision is so far out from the core that they're doing right now that it kind of confuses the confounds the business model and such.
Sure.
So that'd be, I guess, my perspective as someone who's seen a lot of decks, I'm sure you have, is when you add that ultimate vision, a lot of times it confuses the pitch. But, to your point.
Yeah, the way I would describe it is a lot of times when I speak to founders, they want to sell me on the big vision, right? Like, do you see what I'm seeing? And this isn't every investor, but you should assume every investor has heard an idea similar to yours. Like, it's painful to hear. But you'd be shocked at how many pitches and presentations investors see on a weekly basis. And you'd be shocked to find out that most of them have probably heard of a competitor that does what you do, and you don't even know they exist. That's a really difficult one, right? But the biggest mistake that people talk about when I hear them is they jump from where they want to start and they immediately go to this big idea. And what most investors think about, believe it or not, is how often and how many times they're going to get diluted. If I put in $1 million and I only own 10% of your business, right? So you have a $10 million post money valuation. And then you're going to need to raise money to get to 500 million. I'm not thinking about, ooh, how cool is it? I'm thinking, when am I going to get bought out? Or how many times will I get cut down so my 10% is now 2%? And what is my exit strategy? How am I going to get out of this deal? So most people are thinking, especially angel investors, they're thinking about how they're going to help you get to product market fit and how they're going to get out of your deal. So that big vision idea is like Series A, Series B type of presentation. The people you're investing in the seed stage and the early stage of the business, they need to believe that you're not going to just burn through the cash. They need to know you have a plan to money.
Excellent. Awesome. Other questions from?
So you're talking about maybe a product that has a two-sided marketplace, like maybe you sell to a business, but consumers also buy it from the other side? Or, I mean, because in those cases, the use cases are different, right? So it's really hard, believe it or not, to concisely sell a business that has two different converging buyers or users, right? I mean, it actually is. And there are a lot of ideas like that where someone says, I'm going to build this enterprise software so that they can run their business, so that they can service their customers, but they want their customers to be a subscriber. I've built products like that, and it's really hard to tell that story. So early on, you need to think about who you're really selling to, and how you go about getting that point across and how it makes money. I'm telling you, every investor is going to say, so where's the money? I have a slide, usually in my presentations, that says, how we make money is the title of my slide. I don't say market opportunity. I go, this is how we make money. And then I explain 1, 2, 3, right? I try to make it very simple. Every investor, whether you realize it or not, they all like ideas. How you get paid. So, and here's one of my pitfalls. I like helping people. So one of my big problems is I'll listen to your story and try to tell you how to fix it. And I usually will do it, over a phone call, or I'll listen to it. I'll also tell you if I think the idea is awful. But like I had a guy one time tell me he was going on to Shark Tank. And he had this idea, and I was sitting at Whole Foods in Town Square, and he was selling me on it. And after I listened to it, I said, oh man, you launch this business, your wife's going to be mad at you. And he goes, no, my wife is totally in support of this. I said, no, don't get me wrong. You're going to build this. Then you're going to have to buy like 100,000 of them from a crate from China. No one's going to buy it. And then it's going to fill your garage. And then your wife's going to be mad at you. And he looked at me and was like, no way. And I didn't want to, I felt bad killing this guy's dream, but he went on Shark Tank and they laughed him out. I felt bad, but I felt like, anyway, I just thought, well, that's tough. Yes.
I'm sorry, I haven't heard enough time to explain this. It's real difficult.
Oh, I'd love to chat with you about it and see how you can figure that out. So, like, for example, are you trying to sell a service? Are you trying to sell an application?
Yes,
Yes.
and product.
And do you know who your initial customer is, or who probably is going to be your main customer?
School district.
Okay.
By
And why is it you believe school districts are going to have that problem, or why they need it? What is it about your solution or service that makes you believe they're going to care?
coding data and everything else that.
All right, so it's speed,
Absolutely.
faster, better speed. All right, so those are things, I would definitely recommend going to that YouTube channel of my friends who goes through it and going through it. If you reach out to me, my email address, I'm happy to have a 30-minute conversation with you and just talk through it. Yeah, no problem.
Excellent. How does a founder get the right people on board so he can pay them when he gets investors?
Yeah, so that is partially story and the gospel story, right? Of the why the business exists and why you should believe in it. Let me tell you, hiring people is one of the hardest things you're ever going to do. Most people are terrible at it. I'm going to tell you a true story that's going on right now with a very good friend of mine. I just talked to him this past week. Scariest story I've heard as a founder. He said, Nick, right now, because everyone's working remotely, what's happening is out of India, they're building these interview farms where someone interviews for the job, gets the job, and then the person who actually shows up at work is not the person who interviewed. But they kind of look similar, right? So now I just want you to put on your racism hat and think about how someone might confuse how someone looks based off a video, right? I don't care what ethnicity it is. We all look the same, right? So someone does a video, gets interviewed, they get hired. Why do they do it? Because in most large corporations, the HR process to get rid of that employee may take up to 12 months. So this person who got hired because someone else did the interview for them is going to get paid for 12 months while the company is trying to fight them legally. And if that person can fake the job for 35 to 60 days, right? 45 to 60 days, I mean, that company is stuck. That's an actual business. People are doing that. And I know a guy, he's like, man, we're having a problem because no one wants to come in the office. We're all going to work remotely. You want to talk about fear of hiring. Imagine you think you're interviewing the perfect person and someone else shows up. Oh, and that's happening right now. It's scary. Hiring the right person is really hard. Good people are expensive. You have to build that into your business model and fundraise. If you do not raise money that accounts for the people you're going to hire, those people will never stay with you and you'll never have a real business. You have a hobby. That's the truth.
Ooh, hard truth. All right. Any other questions in the room? All right.
My reaction to what you just said, or told,
He said,
yeah, so, okay, well, I'm gonna try to do this and I'll try not to, I couldn't hear you with the name of your business, but that doesn't matter. What you talked about was using autonomous vehicles to improve the experience of home buyers.
Yeah.
Did I?
Home shopping.
So not the home shopping, I'm going to buy at QVC. You're talking about purchasing a home experience. Okay. So to me, I'm having a hard time initially connecting how those two ideas converge, right? When I think of autonomous vehicles, I'm thinking of something completely different. And in my mind, I'm having a hard time taking a leap to understanding why that helps make the purchasing of homes better. You're going to have to connect that because right off the bat, so this is the other thing investors do. You'll tell that first 30 seconds of your story and the person will say, nope, I don't agree. right? As soon as, if they're not like, I'm in it, I'm listening, yeah, that's good stuff. They are trying to break your model in their mind before you get past the 3-minute mark. I've seen investors, I've seen a founder in a room full of 500 million to $1 billion family offices. I'm talking a massive room of them. And this founder was having such a difficult time explaining his business and value proposition. They cut him off and they said, I'm done. Answer this question. I mean, that's a problem, right? Right off the bat, I'm saying to myself, okay, I don't understand. It's not clear to me. We're going to have to go down the rabbit hole of why you would use autonomous vehicles and what the purpose of that is, right? Yeah, that's a tough one. I'm not saying you're wrong. I don't understand it well enough. So if I don't understand it, you really have to work on that. And look, I only listened to like 15 seconds, right? And immediately I'm like, don't know that I would do that. I don't even know you. I'm not trying to be offensive, but you have to really think through that. You may have $1 billion business on your hands. I don't know it. And so I would immediately go, okay, no thanks. Anyway.
Excellent. Nick, there's from Mike online. Yeah, he's USAFA 16 actually. So
Oh, nice.
right on. How valuable is traction then in comparison to the perception of a team? And are there different ways you can communicate either of those?
Talking about traction, like sales, or acquiring users.
Let's say we define traction as either revenue or something metric based, as opposed to milestones, which are obviously milestones. So metric based outcomes that are showing or demonstrating, growing success of the company.
Yeah. So revenue is king.
Yeah.
I would say if you can prove that you know how to make money, you're the master of the negotiation. You can dictate the conversation. When you're making money and you don't need it, that's when everyone wants to give it to you. I mean, they're like, how do I get in on this racket? Right? Figure out how you make money before you quit your day job. Most people are like, oh man, I really want to make this. I'm going to start an Etsy store. I think I'm going to spend $1,000 on a laser engraver. I joke about it because I did that. And then you think, well, what is that business? Is it going to sit in my garage and take up dust, right? What is that thing that you're going to do? You have to really think through, how do you make money? Can you prove that you can make money? Not to an investor, to yourself. And then you better do that time versus money equation we all have in our mind. Is it worth it? If you have a business, you'll know yourself. Can I make enough to support myself if I can scale? Businesses that are labor intensive, that are solely dependent on you, that isn't using machine learning or AI now, that business doesn't scale, right? Back in 1999, I walked into a company in Monterey, and they had a warehouse full of people writing content, trying to manipulate search engines. I think it was like Info Search Media was the name of the company. And they would charge you, because back then the algorithm for Google was an article that had 400 words would rank in Google. So these guys would house this farm of people. I'm talking thousands that were just writing content to manipulate Google. And then Google changed their algorithm and that company went out of business. Those things exist. There are a lot of labor intensive businesses. You probably need to launch them in the Philippines or something. I mean,
and how would you, if you couldn't necessarily rely on, if you did have revenue, is team going to be really important or even more important? Can you have lack of traction but communicate that the team is the one to make it happen and have that be effective?
Yeah, so if you have zero traction, but your team has a proven track record, that is worth a lot. The idea that you may have failed in your last company is not a killer for an investor if you can articulate that you learned something from your last startup, like what you would do differently now and why you're going to succeed now, right? They want to know that they're investing in someone who learns and is willing to take advice. But usually that's where there are some investors that will say, I only invest in experienced teams. And I think those investors tend to miss out on really big deals, but they usually are very risk averse investors. Then you have cowboy investors like myself who are like, oh yeah, I love that idea and I can totally fix that CEO. Right? Thinking we're going to rule the market. That's tough.
You've been married.
Twice.
There's questions are related.
Yeah. The first one, my wife is trying to fix me, so.
I got some point on that. Any other questions from in the room?
Yeah,
You mentioned startup ahead, startup bill.
ooh, you're asking a self-professed Kickstarter addict, so I can tell you all about it, right? So what Kickstarter was in 2015 and not what it is today.
Could you just?
Oh, yeah, I apologize. So the question was, he had asked about me investing in a failed Kickstarter campaign. And that he realized or noticed that Kickstarter is often used to prove product market fit, to get an MVP to market, and then also validate the business so that when they take it to an investor, they can have metrics or data that shows that the idea is solid. I'd say that's the idea of Kickstarter, but that's not what Kickstarter is today. Okay. The way I would describe Kickstarter now is that it is a exercise in manipulating marketing and sales, and it's really a moneymaker for these companies that are doing data collection. So, I mean, I'm a super backer on Kickstarter, right? I buy a lot of ideas and waste a lot of money, right? I like stuff like that. But what it is now is it's very rare that you get an idea that is unique, that doesn't require the inventor to spend tens of thousands of dollars to put a marketing campaign behind the idea. If you're going to launch an idea on Kickstarter and you think the Kickstarter algorithm is just going to promote you, they have an algorithm. If your idea is not getting enough backers in the first 48 hours, it starts to drop to the bottom. You'll see a lot of campaigns where they have an idea and they just want to raise $1,000 to prove their idea. There's zero chance any real idea only costs $1,000 to make. You have machining costs. If you have to go overseas and deal with tooling, you have bill of materials, shipping, handling, and all of those things. There's a high likelihood that if it's a highly technical product and it's not being made by an experienced founder, you're going to lose your money. And I'm a perfect example of someone who knows what that looks like. But let's talk about Peak Design. Peak Design makes my favorite bag camera accessories. They launched on Kickstarter, and every new product they launch on Kickstarter. Why? Because they have a loyal buyer base that believes in their brand because they've always succeeded bringing product to market. I go around and spread the gospel with Peak Design. I love their products. I share it with everyone. I try to convince people to buy their products. I own zero of that company. But I like them because they've succeeded. They've solved a problem that I have, and they've done it beautifully. So Kickstarter is a great place to start. Indiegogo, those sort of crowd-based campaigns. But the most successful campaigns I've seen now, you have to spend a lot of money, and you're usually taking an angel investor just to try. I'm not saying that's all of them. Like, I think the most successful Kickstarter campaign ever was a writer who was a ghostwriter, and he said, I'm going to create 4 new books. I don't know what they are yet, but back my campaign and I'll give you 4 books over the next 2 years. I think I raised $40 million. Right? That's just like stuff out of his head. I think it's the most successful Kickstarter campaign ever. I don't buy stuff like that on Kickstarter because to quote Nate Bargatze, I don't read. There's just too many words, right? No, I'm just kidding. But I don't buy the books on Kickstarter. And so that's a really interesting use of that platform. So people use it. If you're going to use it that way and you have a product and you're going to 3D print a model and kind of prove an example, don't get caught wasting a lot of money. Like, really study the successful campaigns and what did they do right. Usually if you have a good, compelling video, your odds go through the roof. If you've had one successful campaign, usually people will back you for a second. You get to second, third, and fourth campaigns, then you usually have, loyal buyers on that platform. And most people, it'll kill your brand, right? Most people think that if you don't fulfill on Kickstarter, you're the devil. Like, go read the comments. It's scary.
And then the other thing that people are trying to use crowdfunding, you cannot go to a venture capitalist or to an angel investor. They cannot invest while you're running a crowdfunding campaign.
So I guess I've never seen a crowdfunding campaign get funded when an angel investor is doing that, but that would make sense to me. I invested in Upcart after they failed. And I'll tell you how I did it. I wrote him an email. I said, hey, how much money are you really looking for? And his answer to me was exactly what we were trying to raise on Kickstarter, which was $250K. I said, no, thanks. He then comes back to me about 2 or 3 months later, says, I only need 50,000. I said, that's great. I have 30. Let me know when you have the other 20. He then calls me and said, I got the 20. I need your 30. I said, great. I want 10% of your business. Gives it to me, comes to Vegas, wins the award for best new hardware. I then loan him $100,000 so he can fulfill the QVC, and that company's takes off like a rocket, but they also failed, right? But those types of things happen. Kickstarter has a lot of value. I've seen more things fail, especially all the campaigns that launched during COVID, because supply chains just got messed up.
Question from in the room, all right.
Yeah, I'm not saying no one ever does it, but I mean, when you're talking about Elon Musk, he launched Tesla and SpaceX on the fact that he was successful at PayPal. And I know the guy who gave him the money that saved Tesla. His name's Antonio Garcia, right? They call him Tony Thank You, or Gracias, I mean. Tony Thank You is his nickname, right? That business was one of 10 ideas they invested in. 9 failed, Tesla succeeded. He's worth 700 million now, right? But he invested in Elon Musk because he sold X.com or merged X.com in with PayPal. And they found success with Moskovitz and those other investors, right? So I think, I'm sorry, I'm getting that one mixed up with Facebook. But they had a proven track record. When you're talking about hardware is very hard. And most hardware startups fail.
Even if we just think about
Yeah, but would you argue that, like in the case of NVIDIA, that it was the founder who invented the chip, or it took decades for that company to really turn into the business that it is today?
Well, how many people started?
Well, so that's a perfect example, right? How many people tried to do what they did and failed? And so now as an investor, I'm like, what are the odds that the one out of the 5,000 that are going to try to do that, I pick the right one? DataBuoy, a perfect example. I invested in DataBuoy without I did a lot of due diligence, but I didn't do hours of due diligence. And about 2 months after I invested, I found out that there were other companies doing what they do. And I thought, oh my gosh, what a failure. I got lucky. They did build the best technology in the market, right? But I've been invested in that company for 7 years, and it's only now that we're getting market traction. So most people say, well, I don't know that I want to invest in that. The odds of you being right are really low. It's not that they don't think you're right, it's that they're gambling. Investing is rolling the dice, and you're looking for the least likelihood of failure. And that's usually what happens. And so when a investor says, I don't want to back a founder investor, it's not that they don't like the idea, it's that they think the odds of them succeeding, because maybe they don't take advice or they don't listen, they don't even want, they had such a bad taste in their mouth previously that they don't even want to experience that again. The battery company that I invested in is brilliant. So many people got burned in 2008, 2009 investing in battery tech. And I'm talking to the tune of hundreds of millions of billions of dollars that most funds won't even look at battery tech. And that's just the nature of the game.
One thing I'll add, and I think Nick already said this, is that one of the reasons why it's a hard game sometimes for technical founders is because typically they're the brains behind this product, and they take it to heart that it's their baby, it's their creation. And because it's their baby and it's their creation, they won't take advice on how to sell it, market it, change, pivot, et cetera. They, a great example is that a technical entrepreneur sells what they want, not what the market wants. And that by doing that, they've probably made it non-backable as in a venture landscape. So that's one of the things that I think, our group looks at is it's not the technical founder, you can't do it. It's that they typically are so in love with their product and idea that they are unwilling to budge from the vision that they have.
Well, and you also know that we've all been hoodwinked in bad relationships, right? So when you first met that person, you were like, this is the one. And then maybe 6 months to a year later, you're like, what did I do? Same thing happens for investors, right? When an investor puts money in your business, it's a marriage. Same thing with your partners that you choose. Be very careful with the partners that you choose. Be very careful with just giving away 49 or 50% of your business. Be very careful. Do not be in a hurry to fail.
And with that, Lee Jones, I want to thank you so much.